Hello everyone, welcome to Tactica Imperialis and to today's video. Today is going to be episode 3 of season 2 of An Aelfen Adventure, my Warhammer Age of Sigmar hobby project. I know this episode is a little bit late. Having a busted collarbone and not much movement in your arm does prevent you from painting somewhat, but my arm's nearly fixed now. I'm back in the swing, I'm able to paint, so I'm hoping to get this project back underway. I've actually got a couple of episodes ready in terms of models, but I wanted to just hold off to make sure my arm was healed in case I put those episodes out, and then we had a 6-week gap. Didn't want that to happen, so we had a bit of a delay. Here we are. Today I'm going to be showing off one new unit for you, something that will introduce a new unit type into the army that you haven't seen before, as well as a new painting material texture, component, that sort of thing. And that's the one thing I've actually come to really appreciate about how the Daughters of Khaine work in terms of their model range. Because often with the Daughters of Khaine, or at least with their sort of core units, the units that you paint, if you then combine the techniques together, you can create something with the bigger models later. So you learn to do blood on the Blood Rat Medusa, you then apply that to the Cauldron of Blood. You learn to do stone, for example, painting an avatar of Khaine in a sort of iron stone sort of material. You can use that again later, or vice versa. And this is the last unit that I needed to practice on and learn a technique for before I went and applied it to the model for the Daughters of Khaine. If you followed the project when I was working on these models a while ago, you'll know exactly what I'm getting at, and that will be the next episode. But for this episode, it's going to be a bit of a show off the last technique that I needed to get them ready, as well as have a tactical discussion about that unit. The second part of the episode, we'll be having a tactical segment, and I want to talk about prayers. We've shown off the priest models before. In episode 1, I showed off the Hag Queen, but I wanted to talk about the prayers long form because they are very useful if you remember to use them and then have a bit of a understanding of how they work. So I'm going to do that in the second section, and then when we go into episode 4, we'll just have a dedicated models video. After that, well, I've got to keep a few cards close to my chest, don't I? So let's get started with the episode. We'll do the unit first, and you can see what we're adding into the army next, and then we'll have a tactical discussion if that interests you. And of course, thank you for your patience in this episode being a little bit late. I know it's not one of the most viewed things that I upload, generally, but those of you who do appreciate hobby projects, I do appreciate you coming out and giving them a watch. It's always nice to see that there's some engagement in that front. So, without further ado, let's get started. This is episode 3 of season 2 of An Aelfen Adventure. Let's go. So, unit the first for today, and apologies I can't quite get all of them into the camera and everybody nicely shown off, is a unit of 5 Khainite Heart Renders. This is the missile variant of the flying harassment troops, I suppose is the best name for them, for the Daughters of Khaine. And as you can see, I've gone for quite a striking colour contrast in terms of the scheme. Allow me to demonstrate, shall we, with you? You'll do, you're at the front. So the flesh is painted the same way as for my other witch elves, that being pallid witch flesh over a white undercoat with some Reikland flesh shade and some more pallid witch flesh, nice and simple. The armor's painted the same way with just Mephiston and corn red, a wash and some Mephiston red, and that is also applied to their shields, the bladed bucklers, I believe they're called. No, heart piercer shields in this case, though they look pretty much identical to the bladed bucklers of the Sisters of Slaughter. The tails are done in the same way as the flesh because, well, logic just sort of suggested to me that they were just fleshy protrusions. Best word I can come up with, sorry. And I've gone for purple sort of tassels, black leather boots, silver weapon, gold for the helms with silver for the horns. You could potentially argue that the horns are biological, however, I don't think so. Just looking at the models, it does look like the horns are part of the helm as opposed to anything else. So I think I just need to get the camera zoomed. Yep, that's correct. Thank you, focus. However, you're probably drawn immediately to, well, once you were drawn to the middle, you were then drawn out to the wings. This isn't the cleanest of the wings that I've done, but this is what the scheme is for the wings. So the wings themselves, the membranes, are simply painted in black. Nice dark colour to contrast with the pale flesh. As for the spindly bits, sorry, someone who's better at biology, let me know what they are actually called, the sort of fins and the claws and that sort of thing, I've painted those in a dark purple, because the purple goes with my sort of spot colour that I use sometimes on my witch elves and on robes, which is purple. And it also doesn't go too garishly against the black. I actually got the inspiration from the Daughters of Cain battle tome, which is what gave me the idea. And for the paints that I've used, I think for the Khainite, oops, sorry, just not the camera. I think I simply used, where is it? No, genuinely, where is it? I think I simply primarily used Zerus Purple, formerly known as Lich Purple, for those of you who still speak Old Citadel like I do. I could have gone darker, and in fact, on later models that have wings, I will start on a darker base coat, because I've seen what that looks like, and actually looks quite good. But I basically just went Zerus, Wash, Zerus, just to give the effect. And then I tried to paint the sort of veins on the membranes in a similar way. Unfortunately, I'm not that accurate a painter. I tried. I really tried, but I could only do so much. The leader of the unit has a bit more detail. That is called the Shrike. Yep, that's correct. It's the Shrike, because for some reason, she gets to keep her hair. So again, I've done the purple tabard and face cloth the same way as for the little tassels on the other heart renders. And the hair, I've done the same way as for my witch elves. And actually, this is one of the better hairs I painted using the Coelia green shade highlight up approach. You can see that the little scales and fins coming out of the tails. I've decided to do those in purple as well. Though, in all truth, if I was doing things generally that are scales, as you saw with my snakes, I've done those in blue, greens, those sorts of tones. I just thought that that colour wouldn't go very well, so I didn't. I haven't actually painted the bases. I guess I was just in a bit of a rush to get these girls out. But it doesn't ruin the overall effect, and the basing is something I can take care of sort of at my leisure, I suppose. You can see as well that not all of the helmets are the same. So this one here has no face showing, it's just a pure mask. Whereas this one back here, you can clearly see it has a face under the mask. So it's interesting that there's a nice bit of variety. The one thing there isn't actually any variety in is the shield designs, because they're all very, very similar. I think they've all got this sort of winged beast symbol, which is kind of disappointing. I was hoping for a little bit more variety, even if it was just for the Shrike to have a unique shield, because, yeah, oh well. As assembly goes, not too bad. You've just got to be a little bit careful about order. So the way that Khainite go together is that the wings, kind of like the Melisite arms, are sculpted into the back, or there are components of the back that are missing and that you push the wings into. So I don't know how well you'll be able to see that, but you see how the wings protrude. Those are glued in segments as opposed to painting around the back. Yeah, that one's probably one of the messier joins from the glue wearing the paint off. So you sort of see the wings get stuck into the back in quite big pieces. So that's a good thing and a bad thing. It's a good thing in that they're pretty stable. Like, I had no breaking issues with the wings at all. But it does mean that you don't have any posability with the wings. They go in at one orientation and one orientation exactly. Part of the reason for that is because the Life Takers, the other variant, I think they've still got their hair, so they need to be orientated in a very particular way. But that is one thing that does sort of disappoint me about AOS models. And I think I've said it before, if not in this series, then I've said it somewhere, that they're not as customizable as they used to be. In terms of the instructions don't encourage customization, and the kit itself is very by the numbers. You kind of have to build it by the numbers or the kit's going to punish you. You can do customization, and I've seen some fantastic customization. The Night Haunt in Venice were amazing that I saw on Warhammer Community, but the kits themselves don't encourage it, like swapping stuff around. But that's a minor quibble, I suppose, from someone who's used to converting like crazy for their orcs and the Tau. Just having a load of customizable and posability was something I really enjoyed, so there's a bit of something stuck on that wing. But yeah, the assembly's been fine, and they're not as fragile as you might think, but just be careful with them. Standard rules apply. Now, As for why I built them this way around, because obviously, as I sort of hinted at before, there are two builds for Khainite. Heartrenders, which is the variant you see here, and Life Takers, the main difference being in the weapon in their right hand. Life Takers have melee weapons, their sickles, whereas the Khainite have their javelins, these missile weapons that you can see here. So the Heartrenders have a 12-inch range shooting attack, hits on 3s, wounds on 3s, has 1 rend, does 1 damage. And then in melee, 2-inch reach, 1 attack, 4s and 4s, 1 rend, does 1 damage. Which is fine, it's nothing special, but they're only 80 points, which is good. Both units are move 14 with 1 wound, a 6-up save, and bravery 7, plus their fanatical faith if you're playing them as a Daughters of Khaine army. As for the Life Takers, they have their sickles, which are 2 melee attacks, 1-inch reach, 3s and 4s, no rend, and 1 damage. So, on that front, the Khainite Life Takers are kind of bad. Both of them get the ability to arrive from reinforcement and just drop onto the battlefield more than 9 inches away. Both of them have the ability to move after making their primary attack, so after the Khainite Heartrenders shoot, they can make a 6-inch move on a 4+. After the Khainite Life Takers fight in the combat phase, they can make a 6-inch move on a 4+ if they choose to do so, which allows them to disengage. It is very, very useful, keeps your units alive, allows you to jump, shoot, jump a little bit, or jump, charge, fight, jump out, which is very, very useful if you don't want to get tar pitted, or you're banking on a lucky double turn and you don't want to have to be forced to retreat. That sort of thing is all very useful for you. The difference mainly comes in their secondary ability linked to their weapons. So for the Heartrenders, they get shoot and run, which is very, very useful. I mean, you're move 14 already, so running isn't that critical to you, but if you really need to cover distance and book it to get into range, or you need to get across the board quickly, then that's useful. But if you are arriving on the battlefield in a given turn, then your rend characteristic of your javelins becomes rend 2, which means that on the turn they arrive, they can actually get rend 2 shooting out, and that's something that Daughters have none of. Daughters actually really don't have a lot of rend. I mean, they're absolutely chewing up the meta, I'm aware of that, but they don't have much in the way of rend unless you've got relics or other nonsense like Mind Razor knocking about. So it's good to see that. On the other hand, the Life Takers, they are more consistent in that their sickles get +1 damage on the turn they make a charge move. So Daughters get 2 attacks each, 3s and 4s, no rend, damage 2 every time they charge, which can be a lot if you're careful with them. So it allows the Life Takers to do a lot of damage very, very quickly, but there is a catch. They'll die almost immediately afterward. And that's always been the problem with Daughters, is that they're glass cannons. Khainite are super glass cannons because they have basically no defense. A 6-up followed by a 6-up in a Daughters army is basically nothing. Mystic Shield can't help them much because they're such a small unit. They'll just get massacred against anything of decent size. You really need to be careful where you deploy these girls so that they can take out the dangerous units like war machines, wizards, maybe some, if you really feel brave, taking on some light cav who are flanking you, just picking off like light cavalry or skirmishers, that sort of thing. That's what Khainite excel at. Using them to supplement a battle line, not so much. They'll die in 5 seconds. The reason I went for Heartrenders over Life Takers is quite simple. Shooting. I wanted shooting. Because I built my Blood Sisters, my Melisai, originally with the plan to make Blood Stalkers, and then I changed my mind. So I wanted to get some shooting into the army so that I wasn't forced to play pure mono melee. And Heartrenders are actually proven to be very useful, just dropping in, and they're very good at baiting. So you drop them in, they throw their javelins at something, and say, come on, come get us, and the enemy does. Because if they don't, then the Khainite are going to hop around, grab objectives, pick off characters, be very, very annoying, but they have to come and deal with them, which for slow armies can pull units miles out of position, and that can be really, really beneficial to you. So that's why I prefer Heartrenders, is for distraction, as well as getting the rend against armoured enemies. I think that's more useful than getting damage, because what's good is damage if you can't break the armour. That's not to say Life Takers don't have a place, they absolutely do. I just think that they're better suited to the assassin role, as opposed to the distraction and the poke role that I want from the Heartrenders. That's the difference for me. In terms of battalions, I have actually shot myself in the foot here because Life Takers go in the Witch Elf battalion and Heartrenders go in the Sister of Slaughter one. Now, I know Sisters of Slaughter have been tearing up the top tables, so I think actually maybe Heartrenders is a better choice because of that, but I can't make either a Cauldron Guard or a Slaughter Troop because I'm missing one of the 2 key sets of units. That's just the way I built the army, so oops, go me. And it's actually quite a useful one because it gives the Heartrenders the ability to retreat and act, which is very, very useful, and to retreat and shoot. And the the Cauldron Guard that lets you give the Life Takers and the Witch Elves, I think, a bonus to their runs and charges, something like that. So yeah, they are useful battalions. I've just not taken them. The other thing to note with Life Takers is that they can be hoarded. So if you take 20 of them, they cost 280 instead of 320. Nice benefit, but is it really worth it to get a saving of 2 points per model? I mean, it might be, but Daughters of Khaine don't really have cheap units, so you can't really fill that out anywhere else unless you're just looking to scrap some points together. And I think they're better off in small units, going around doing harassment and pick-off, as opposed to a big block, because if you want to use a unit like that for picking stuff, for being a big block of mass murder, well, Witch Elves might not have damage too, but they can have double the attacks, and you get 30 of them for the cost of 20 Heartrenders, so you're actually doing 1.5 times as much damage, assuming armor save rolls and spillover and all of that sort of thing. It's actually better to just use Witch Elves in the Horde capacity, and Heartrenders in a Horde is not sensible because then you just don't have the room to deep strike them and get the benefit of their extra rend. So there you go, that is the unit that we're adding, and I've now learned how to do flesh, I've learned how to do armor, I've learned how to do scales for snakes, and I've now learned how to do wings. So have a guess what I'm going to be showing off next time. But before we get to that, I want to have one more tactical segment, and let's talk about prayers. Because I think they're very, very important to the Daughters of Khaine. I don't know if they're as important as the magic, because they're a little bit more niche, but I think they're worth talking about, so let's get to that now. Okay, section 2 for today is the tactics segment. Today, as I said earlier, I want to talk about prayers. So, welcome back to the screen, the Slaughter Queen and the Hag Queen that you've seen in previous parts, and also my avatar of Khaine. This is a very old model of mine. So, the Cauldron of Blood, I think, was the very first Daughters of Khaine thing I ever painted when I did this project 3 years ago. And the avatar was probably my favourite model of the entire set in terms of how well it was painted. I look back at it now and it's absolutely awful, but I thought I should put it sort of on the screen because it's kind of relevant to this discussion. Also, I'm going to square the camera up. I haven't got it quite square. Whoops, sorry. So yes, I want to talk about prayers, and the reason the avatar's here is because there is a prayer relevant to the avatar, so let's talk about the avatar on the tabletop while we're at it. The first prayer for the Khainite Cult. Actually, I should probably work through how prayers work before I start. So prayers are simply a 3+ to cast. If you roll a 1 to cast, you do yourself a mortal wound, as far as I remember correctly. That is correct. On a 1, you take a mortal wound. On a 2, nothing happens. On a 3, you successfully get the prayer off, and its effect applies. The Hag Queen knows 2 inbuilt prayers. Rune of Khaine to give her damage D3, and Kiss or Caress of Death, which allows you to plink a guy within 3 inches for D3 mortal wounds if your opponent can't guess which hand you've got to dice it. The Slaughter Queen also gets a third prayer, which is the Dance of Agony, which means that you can choose them to pile in twice in the combat phase. Note that both of these prayers, that prayer particularly is only true for the Slaughter Queen on foot and is not used for the Slaughter Queen on Cauldron of Blood because that would be too unfair. If there is an avatar on the board, which is why the avatar's here, there is an additional prayer that all priests know, which allows you to animate an avatar anywhere on the battlefield until your next hero phase, which allows you to use its Torrent of Burning Blood shooting attack and its Sword of Khaine melee attack, and also allow it to move. It can still be attacked if it's not animated, but it can only do stuff back if it is animated itself. It's treated... even if this model is not animated, it's treated like a model from your army, allowing enemy units which start their movement phase in 3 inches or less and can stay in place or move normally. They don't have to retreat even if they're unless there's another unit within 3 inches. So if it is unanimated, you can retreat from it freely, but it is counted as a model from your army in any case, and they can therefore be smacked. So, with that out of the way, the prayers that you get one additional prayer in an army that is Daughters of Khaine. So you take the allegiance ability Daughters of Khaine, you build Daughters of Khaine's army, you get Rites of Blood, you get Fanatical Faith, and diddly diddly dee, and you also get one additional prayer on top of the prayers I've already listed. You only get one unless I think there is an artifact that allows you to get a second one. Is that correct? Yeah. The bloody symbol, one of the relics of Khaine, 4 priests allows you to get a extra one, which is nice. And you also get the ability in a Daughters of Khaine army, you know a prayer from the Khainite Cult, a second prayer in your hero phase, but the same prayer cannot be cast in more than once in your hero phase, no matter how many priests know it. So the first prayer is Catechism of Murder. This one's one of my favourites. Friendly unit within 14 inches until your next hero phase. If you roll a 6 to hit after rerolls but before modifiers, so a natural 6, that unit in the combat phase can do 2 hits instead of 1. So roll a dice to hit. If it gets a 6, add 1 to the amount of hit rolls you've got, which is very, 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 very useful if you're, say, rolling, oh, I don't know, 40, 80, 100 dice. You can easily find yourself adding a fair few dice to the hit pile. If you're only rolling 10 dice, 12 hits, or sorry, 2 extra hits isn't going to change the world. But if you're rolling 30 dice, suddenly that's about 5 hits. That actually might make a bit of a difference. So it's a very good scale up ability. Though it only applies in the combat phase, bear that in mind. I should also mention that I'm not sure how this ability combos with the Blood Sisters in particular, because they have an ability in the combat phase, which, if I remember it correctly from the previous episode, hang on, let me just find their war scroll. War scroll, here we go. So, the Crystal Touch, each time that you score a hit with the Crystal Touch, you do a mortal wound. So, if the Crystal Touch attack gets a natural 6 to hit, then it's 2 mortal wounds. Something to keep in mind. Very useful little hidden extra ability, I think, at least if I'm reading it correctly. The second one is the Benediction of Khaine. A friendly unit within 14 inches can reroll its Fanatical Faith saves. So those 6-up save after saves that you get, you can reroll them for a unit within 14 inches. I'm not the biggest proponent of the 6+ save after a save. I've said it in 40k, I've said it in AOS. I don't know how good it is unless you're up against an army that really specialises in mortal wound output, or an army that's got a lot of rend in the case of Daughters of Khaine, because generally Daughters of Khaine don't get a save if there's any rend knocking about. So it has its uses, and I think in the early game it might be useful for just keeping a Cauldron of Blood at a higher save, or keeping Marathi at a higher save, a higher wound count I should say, but it's not that stellar unless you roll very, very well. Because it's just re-rolling 6s. It's just a 6-up. So, it's alright. It's not my favourite, though. Martyr's Sacrifice. This is another very useful one. Friendly unit within 14 inches. Until the start of your next hero phase, each time that a model from this unit is killed in the combat phase, on a 5+, the attacking unit takes 1 mortal wound after they've finished attacking. This means that you can actually afford to not strike first with your Daughters of Khaine, and also anticipate charges. So what you can do is say, right, my Witch Elves are probably going to get charged by that unit of cavalry. That cavalry needs to fight first because the Witch Elves will utterly murder them. So let's just throw Martyr's Sacrifice on, and I might get to do some mortal wounds when they start massacring my unit en masse. It's kind of useful, and basically taking the number of models that die over 3 mortal wounds is going to hurt for some units. So a character goes on a murder spree, kills 10 Witch Elves because he's got a damage 3 or something weapon, and then an extra plink. Okay, I'm going to do 3 mortal wounds to you. There's half your wounds gone. Or something like that. It's very useful, but you've got to place it correctly. Because only you have to pick these prayers before the game, you do need to actually think about, am I going to get a use out of Martyr's Sacrifice, or am I just expecting to steamroll through a unit and not get charged? So, the one to think about, but a very nice utility one to have in your back pocket.
Also good to throw on a character if they're charging something that's on its last wound, or like, I'm not sure if I can kill it, but I just need that extra wound potentially. You have a 1 in 3 chance of doing that extra wound that you need to finish a unit off. So, also useful there. Pauper's Resurrection, I think that's what that says. I'm reading the French version of the battle tome that I own. For anything within 14 inches other than Marathi, whatever her form, you can heal D3 wounds allocated to a model in that unit. This is really mainly for use on your characters, because Khainite have 1 wound and Melisai have 2 wounds, so you don't heal all that much on them. So it's mainly used for your Cauldrons of Blood, it's mainly used for your avatars, it's used for your characters, and that's about it. I can't think of anything else particularly that's got more... I can't think of anything that's got more than 2 wounds. I'm just going to go skim read through the battle tome to see if there's anything I'm forgetting. Bloodrat Medusa has 6, Melisai have 2, Shrine has 13, Cauldron has 13, Avatar has 9, Slaughter Queen and Hag Queen have 5, can't do it to Marathi. Yeah, it's mainly for heroes, cauldrons, and avatars. So, useful, but not that stellar unless you need to keep a priest particularly alive. A Cauldron of Blood healing itself is useful, keep that in mind. Coven of the Iron Heart. Unit within 14 inches. Until the start of your next hero phase, you do not have to take battle shock tests for this unit. This is a Slaughter Queen prayer, because Hag Queens have Witch Brew. Hag Queens, as you can see by this little thing in her hand here, have Witch Brew. This gives a unit within 3 inches rerolls to wound and immune to battle shock, which is very, 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 very useful. But Slaughter Queens don't have it. And Hag Queens obviously have to be within 3 inches to get it off. So it's a good way to pass out the secondary benefit of Witch Brew, because I think rerolls to wound is better, to a unit just to make sure that if they're going to take a battering, they're not going to run. Bear in mind though, Witch Elves in particular have very good bravery. Witch Elves themselves are bravery 6, 7? I think it might be 7. Hang on. Bravery of 7 plus 1. No, sorry. And then roll 2 dice and keep the lowest for their battle shock tests. So they're not the easiest things to get rid of under any circumstances. You need to kill 2 to make 1 stand even a chance of running, but they're rolling 2d6. You need a double 6 for that to happen. And realistically, you're probably going to need to kill 5 to get them into a position where some of them will run. Now, that's going to hurt on a 30 gil unit. Okay, yeah, it's going to hurt. And the banner isn't as powerful as it used to be, where it was a flat +1 or +2 if a hero was nearby. But it's still useful. And so I think it's a useful one to have, Coven of the Iron Heart, if you've not got many priests, or you have lots of little units that could do with it, or you can't, let's say, attach a Hag Queen to both of your big blocks. So, useful, but it's one you'd build around, or you'd put the prayer in depending on your army build. You wouldn't take it automatically. Finally, I don't actually know how to translate this one. Sacre de Sang, like Sacred Blood, I think. I'm not sure how that one translates. Prayer number 6. Choose a Daughters of Cain unit within 14 inches. And friendly Daughters of Cain. All these have been friendly Daughters of Cain units. I should have made that clear. Within 14 inches. Until the start of your next hero phase, this unit counts the battle round as 1 higher than it actually is for determining the abilities that it receives thanks to the Rites of Blood table. This stacks with other abilities such as, let's say, a Warlord trait, a Command trait, which can also do it. So, what that means, if I were to speak in terms of actual what that means in terms of gameplay, is that if you do this on round 1, then your units will be re-rolling 1s for runs and charges. And bear in mind, units with Hornblowers can run and charge. This is potentially very, very powerful, if you're lucky. If you do it on turn 2, you are giving your units re-rolls of 1s to hit a turn early, which is very, very useful. You can also cast this on an avatar if you don't want to use the animate prayer, or you've already tried to use the animate prayer to accelerate the avatar animation counter, because avatars become animated on turn 3, so casting this on turn 2 means that they become animated a turn early, something worth considering. If you do this on turn 3, then they're rerolling 1s to wound, which is also a very powerful ability. And on turn 4, or on turn, well, you don't do it on turn 5, but on turn 4, you're giving them immune to battle shock again and reroll 1s to save. So this is another alternative in the late game to using Witch Brew or using Covenant of the Iron Heart. So if you just need to keep this in the background because I think, okay, I need my units to hold at the end of the game, okay, I'll give them immune to battle shock a turn early without having to spend a prayer slot on an immune to battle shock prayer. It's pretty useful, I'll give it, but it has its limits because obviously only certain units will benefit from certain things. So only Witch Elves and Kinnerai will really benefit on turn 1. Everything benefits on turn 2, assuming it makes combat, or assuming it gets close enough to get into range for its shooting attacks. So I think it's a better one late game. Early game, it's a bit more situational. As I say, you can stack this with the True Believer command trait, which means that your general counts the battle round as being 1 higher anyway. So a really powerful combo well, I don't know how really powerful combo you could execute is to take a Bloodrack Shrine with the True Believer trait, then use a Hag Queen or Slaughter Queen nearby and give it another +1 through Sacre de Sang, as I'm just going to call it. And then that thing casts Steed of Shadows on itself, so it becomes move 16, rerolling 1s for its charges and 1s to hit on turn 1. That's not a good idea, but it is also hilarious. So, meh. I find it kind of funny. You shouldn't do it, but I think it's kind of funny that you can do that. You could also do the same thing for a Cauldron of Blood, but you can't give it Steed of Shadows, which is why I mentioned Steed of Shadows and the Bloodrack Shrine as opposed to the Cauldron of Blood. But of course, you can still make a Cauldron of Blood go quite quickly. And you have got Symmetric Dance, which is another spell we talked about, which allows you to swing a cauldron a long way up the board if you've got a hero set up in a more advantageous position for a bomb rush, and then you just activate the avatar on the top with your spare prayer and go to town. If you like. You shouldn't, but you can, and that's hilarious. So they're the prayers, and I'll be honest, they're very, very useful, but they're also kind of situational. So Catechism of Murder is great in big units. Benediction of Cain is decent on tanky units because they'll get more out of it. Big units, they're still going to die in droves anyway. Martyr Sacrifice, useful on big units and also on characters if you just need that extra last plink to finish that hero or war machine off. Pauper's Resurrection, useful if you have cauldrons and Bloodrack Shrines, not so much in any other circumstance, although keeping an avatar healed up until it animates is kind of useful. Covenant of the Iron Heart, I think, is probably the weakest, but if you're not planning to run Hag Queens, and thus not running with Witch Brew, then it is probably maybe worth having in your back pocket, so that your 30-girl block doesn't just leg it. And finally, Sacre de Sang, I'm sorry, I don't know its English translation, like Sacred Blood, I'm guessing, or Pact of Blood? Blood Pact? Maybe? Not sure. Is also very, very useful, particularly on big blocks on turn 2 to make sure that they get the rerolls of 1s to hit a turn early. And also, it's more useful as you go into the late game with your powerful units. So, there are benefits to all of the prayers, but they're all situational and they're kind of things you have to build a little bit around. So, consider that. Anyway, I realised I banged on for like 15 minutes about prayers, so I will actually stop here. I thought I might get time to talk about the avatar, but I think I've talked about it very briefly before. Basically, animate it immediately because it's got a damage 3 melee attack and 6 shooting attacks that also have rend on it, and it makes it a very good bullet magnet. So, yeah, do that. It's very, very handy to have that. But that's all for today. I do hope you've enjoyed this episode of An Aelfen Adventure Season 2. Let me know what you think in the comments below about the paint scheme and, of course, the prayers. I always appreciate your input. It's really nice to talk to you guys. And, of course, next time, which is hopefully going to be in a fortnight, well, something special, something shadowy this way comes. Thank you for watching. This has been Tactica Imperialis, and I'll see you all again. Bye for now.